So with that, let's talk about the staff data submission. So the staff demographics is one of the two files used to submit staff data, and that's going to tell us about the staff, who they are. The staff assignment is used to tell us the role and the position they fill, what their job is.
So let's get into the details of each of those file types. So basically for, as Nate mentioned, you have your staff demographics and staff assignments. Basically your staff demographics provide you the basic information of each of your staff members that's being reported. It indicates the employment start date, race and ethnicity, the staff service years, which is important to determine if a staff member is inexperienced or not. Then, of course, you have your staff assignments, which indicates a staff member's general role or designation at the district or charter school. They could be a teacher, pupil service staff, or an administrator. So as you can see here, the staff demographics should first be submitted, and then the staff assignments. And of course, the core element that is important in any submission is the staff member SEID. So the SEID, or the State Educator Identifier, is required for any staff that will be reported with an SDM or SASS file. So only staff members with SEIDs may have their data submitted to CalPADS. So anyone who does not have a SEID, because they're not credentialed, can request a certificate of clearance from CTC, and once that SEID is provided, then you submit the SDM and SASS.
So let's take a moment and think about who are the staff reporter. We know they need a SEID, but what kind of jobs do they do, or what are their classifications? Or better yet, what are the requirements? What are the two things that they need to be reported for Fall 2?
Who should and shouldn't be reported for Fall 2? Do you need to report all staff employed by the district or charter school? Let's see, staff with SEID and those with certificate of clearance. Okay.
Right, I like staff with SEID.
Yeah.
Certificated position, yep.
Okay.
We're just one thing that we're missing, which Kyron will explain for us.
Okay, so here's a basic way to determine who should be reported with a SDM as well as an SASS record. So the first question is, does the staff member have a SEID, which is a basic requirement? If no, then you do not submit a SASS or SDM record. You only submit those two files for a staff member if they have a valid SEID from the CTC. Okay, and if they have a SEID, then your next question is, are they employed by the LEA on census day? If no, then again, do not submit the SAS and SDM. If yes, then submit your SDM and SAS, okay? And then we also have some notes here regarding teachers of record, which is just basically the teachers who should be reported to courses for Fall 2. So this is a shift from what we've always been teaching you guys. So before we would be saying, okay, just report the teacher who was there on census day, regardless if it was a substitute teacher or not. Well, the directive from CDE now changed to you have to report the teacher of record, regardless if that teacher is there or not on census day, meaning if the teacher was on leave, but they were the permanent teacher on record for the class, you should report that on for fall 2. So we have some examples here. So if the teacher of record is on leave and will not return until sometime during the year or even beyond the academic year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, maybe because they were on medical leave, then as long as they are contractually assigned to that class, then you report that teacher of record. So now if the teacher of record is, as I mentioned here, ill on census day, you still report them. You only report a substitute teacher if the class has a vacancy, meaning there was no staff member employed and assigned to those classes. So as I've mentioned earlier, the staff demographics provide you this necessary information. You have your staff service years, the staff's highest degree, and some of the employment status and race and ethnicity. And then for the staff assignment, the main data collected for staff assignment is first the job classification, which identifies them if they're a teacher, an admin, or working as part of the pupil service staff. And this is based on their certification. Okay, and then we have our non-classroom based assignments. These are the jobs that are not directly associated to instructing students. I mean, so if a staff member is not directly instructing students, then you report their non-classroom based assignments. Also, you have to indicate where they are assigned to, what sites. So you have to identify the school of assignment and, of course, their FTE percentage, which is basically the time spent on each job classification in relation to a full-time position at each of those school of assignments. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 general classifications for staff. You have your teachers, admins, and pupil service. However, in terms of CalPADS reporting, it's broken down into different job classifications. So for teachers, you can report a teacher as a regular teacher 12, a charter school non-certificated teacher 26. These are the teachers who weren't able to get a certification and got a certificate of clearance instead. Then you have your 27 itinerant teacher pull-out push-in teachers. For admins, you have your regular admin staff and your non-certificated admin. And then, of course, pupil services 11.
And so we have a question, all right? And we would like for you to consider how should itinerant staff be reported. So if anyone could succinctly type in what is the typical method for reporting itinerant staff, that would be great. Really appreciate it. Also, we probably should have gone over this. And so since this slide is kind of redundant and repetitive, I'll use this time to explain that we're going through this fairly fast, and we will pause for questions. Typically, we might stop and answer questions along the way, but I think Marshall's recording this so that we don't have to do any more live trainings, and we can produce this, right? And so to keep a good flow, we're going to pause incrementally to answer questions. So I see Miguel has a question in there. I think Beth might be answering it for us, so that's great. Thank you, Beth. We'll try to go back and cover the questions. You could bring it to our attention if we don't cover it through the slides when we break. But we appreciate you bearing with us. Thank you. We're not ignoring the chat box. We do see the questions, but if they're not directly related to the slide we're on, we'll try to just get them all a little bit later, right?
Yes. So, going back to the question, how should itinerant staff be reported? So I guess let's just do a contrast from last year's to this year's to give context to this. So last year, or in prior years, itinerant staff are reported with a staff assignment 27. And then assigned to a course. Before, we just use course 3020 if you're providing pull-out push in for EL services or for special ed, staff who were handling pre-K students.
Anybody not on my master schedule, I was going to give them a 27 and 30-20 and call it a day.
Yeah, that was last year. Well, this year's different now, okay? This year, here you report staff differently. So if you look at, on the table, look at column row 3 and row 6, these are the ways to report itinerant staff. So for those teachers teaching 30-20 scenarios last year, so let's say you have EL students that has to be reported, you report a staff member as either a 12, 26, or 27, and identify the state course code. You can't use 30-20 anymore because that has been retired. So for English support, you could use 9103 or 9104. And for staff members handling RSP, you can use 9231. Okay? So you have the option to either submit the SCSE records or not for these scenarios. And then let's say you have a PE teacher who is itinerant. How do you report that now, Nate?
Well, I would pick the correct PE course code, and I think there's been identification by grade level, which is the correct PE course code, but I would still use a 27 to identify that teacher as an itinerant teacher providing pull-in, push-out support, and then I would pick a PE math or PE course code.
Yes, that's right. So that applies to all courses that have itinerant teachers. So you can now report any state course code as long as you have a 27 staff assignment.
So there's no longer that one-size-fits-all course code.
That's right.
And so let's talk a little bit about the course data submission. Just like the staff data submission, the course submission is going to be submitted in two files. First, the course section, and then the student course section. The course section must be submitted first to establish the courses, right? And the course section is a unique instance of a course taught by one or more teachers in a specific location in a particular time. After we've established our courses, we can enroll our students using the student course section, which that file is specifically used to do. There's only two types of courses. They're self-contained and departmentalized. Self-contained courses are multi-subject. They're courses that are taught primarily in primary schools, elementary schools, like the 3rd grade. Departmentalized courses are single subject. They are like algebra, biology, English, and theater. They're primarily secondary level courses taught from 7th through 12th grade. There is no restriction. You can report a self-contained course at a secondary level, and you can have, in many cases, departmentalized courses taught in the primary school. So here are the courses reported by state course code as a series. 1000 is a self-contained course, right? It's a multiple subject course. Anything other than 1000 is considered departmentalized. Typically, again, you're going to see 1000 from kindergarten to 6th grade, and you will see it used sometimes to report independent study of all grades. 6000 is the other related instruction. These courses include homeroom, study hall, teacher's assistants, and the like. 7,000 to 8,000 series is CTE courses, or are the CTE courses. Those are holdovers from previous years. Those course codes were updated a few years ago. And then what's new this year is the 9,000 series. Those are the academic content areas. Those are both core and non-core academic courses. Anything from PE to art to math, foreign language, and science are all in the 9,000 series now. And so there's going to be occasions when you have to report a course section with no SEID, right? You're going to have college courses, ROP courses, distance learning courses, You may have a charter school with a teacher with no SEED this year. And then there are new teachers who don't have SEEDs from the CTC yet. And then we have a note that says courses with SEED, the generic SEED of 999 are automatically flagged for misassignment, right?
Yes, that's correct. So this is in relation to staff assignment monitoring. So normally, if a staff member does not have a SEED, you use a SEED 999 and assign it to the course. However, due to assignment monitoring requiring a credentials, SEED 999 might not have that identified because it's not a valid SEED. You can compare it to someone at the CTC database, right? Because it's a generic SEED. So that's why it's an automatic misassignment, regardless if if it's a real scenario. Don't just a message to you guys. You always have to report what's the real setting. You don't have to just fudge your information just so you would meet compliance, right? So, however, on the note, for college courses, as long as the courses are flagged as college course or dual credit, they won't be flagged as a misassignment.
And if you go to the course data population training, you'll see the field is the non-standard instructional level field in the course section can be used to flag CTE courses with the code of 23 or 24. Otherwise, you should be using the appropriate state course code to indicate that it's a college course so that it's not flagged. So if you have a student taking calculus at college, you wouldn't use a calculus state course code, you would use college math so that if you're reporting the staff member with the generic SEED of 999, it's not a misassignment. Also, this is a great time to emphasize to everyone that this is going to be a dry run. They're going to do everything. The CTC, the CalSASS process is going to be complete. However, it's non-consequential. There's not going to be anything punitive.
I think it's this year.
This year. So, like Kyron said, report the data and the courses as they are, taught by who they are, and just understand that it's non-consequential, there's nothing punitive, and if in the event of a misassignment, there is paperwork after the fact during the monitoring process that can explain the misassignment.
That's right.
And so just understand the process, although we won't be responsible for completing it, just have that in mind. So we're going to move on. And so after your courses are reported, you're going to enroll the students in the course using the student course section enrollment or the SCSE file. And that file is a very small file, but it does have some elements that we're going to discuss. One of which is the course section ID. It's a required element that will tie the student to the specific course section that they are enrolled in. It's identified by the academic year and the school of course delivery. So those are other elements that have to be this corresponding to tie a course section to a student. The SSID is also required to identify the student's demographics and programs. And then as a requirement, the UC-CSU has to be populated, although that's collected in end of year one, but it's a requirement for submission. So the course section is used in part to report EL services, right? Do any of you know how EL services are reported? And so Camille and Irma, thank you. Language of instruction and program. Carl, and that's going to come from the SPRIG, which you point out. That's great. Beth says the LIP.
So what other data elements?
But if we think about the key report in Fall 2, for those of you who have done this, 2.4, EL services, it ties greatly to a specific field. And Beth is saying the course information, so she's going to lead us there, so I'm going to take us home. All right, so we have this wheel over here, right, on the right of the screen. And okay, so we have all the animation on the slide ready. And so you see this, it's pink, the salmon is fuchsia color. One of my coworkers loves to wear fuchsia polos. A very dear friend of mine. His name kind of sounds like Martha. I'm not going to say his name though, you know. But anyway, the course education service code is going to be used to identify the service provided the EL students. And this is a report used to meet state and federal requirements, right? Report 2.4. So although the LIP program provides what used to be the instructional strategy, it identifies which program they're in. The Education Service Code designates the service that's associated to the teacher's authorization and credentials. So the first thing is the student has to be an EL student, and that's going to come from the SELA record that was submitted in fall 1, right? You have to have a SELA record, identify the student as an EL student as of
fall 1.
Census day.
Yes, census day.
They have to be EL student on or before October 2nd.
Yeah, which means they're enrolled on census day with an ELS status of EL before or on census day.
Then you have to enroll that student into a course section, right? That EL student has to be enrolled into a course. So that means you had to submit a student course section enrollment file for that student. And that course section file, the student course section file, has to be associated or correspond with a course record that is the Education Service Code populated. And there's 6 education service codes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 provide services. 5 does not, right? And so if you go to the course data population, you would see that. And so that's why we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but 5 is no services. And you have to populate no services if there's a single EL student enrolled in the course. And the situation in which there may be no services might be the curriculum is not designed to provide services.
Like PE.
Like PE, right?
Music.
Science. Teacher may have the authorizations, but the curriculum may not be there to provide services. Or an EL student might be enrolled and a teacher does not have the authorizations, so there is no way they can provide the services. That again would be a 5. Now, it's not a required field, so if you're up north, you know, some of the districts up north, some of the schools don't have a high English learner student population, and it may not be of significance to them. And so they may have no need to populate the Education Service Code at all. However, if you have just a single English learner, the field has to be populated for the course, or you'll get a fatal error, a fatal certification error. And if that course provides primary language of instruction as designated by Education Service Code 1, you have to populate
the language of instruction code.
The language of instruction. And it cannot be 2 codes, right? It can't be English, because we assume every course is taught in English, and it can't be American Sign Language.
That's right.
Typically, the primary language of instruction for the majority of students corresponds with their primary language, whether they speak Spanish, Hmong, Punjabi, whatever it is.
That's right. Okay, so Nate alluded to the 4th element in that circle, which is the language instructional strategy or instruction program. So in prior years, that element was also reported in the CRSE, which was known as the EL Instructional Strategy Codes. So if you can see, look at the table on the right, you have your CRSE. Those codes have been taken out from the CRSE. Only the special ed and the home and hospital instructional strategy remain in the CRSE. Any EL-related instructional strategy should now be reported as part of the SPRG file, meaning it's not based on the class, it's reported on a student level. So if you can see here, we have new education program codes that correspond to the LIP programs, LIP setting, and they're matching retired instructional strategy codes. So since this is our first year of LIP reporting, what is the program start date? So there are two options here. You either, for students who have been, let's say, who have been enrolled in California for years and are eligible for LIP, you report them with their enrollment start date. However, for those students who are EL just this year, you can report them with their, I guess, EL start date or their EL status date. So,
but what happens if I had a student that was enrolled since 2010 and they were EL and I put my LIT program to their start date?
You'll get a GERS 7 because the code says it's just valid starting 7/1/2019. So that's the reason why either you use the enrollment start date, or if the student is new and just classified this year as EL, use their EL status date.
So,
as long as it's before census date.
Oh, I get it. So if I submitted a program file for LIT programs and I got a whole bunch of GERS 7s, the problem is most likely my my LIT program start date is before the date the code became effective.
Yes, and Beth stated that you cannot backdate the code before 7/1/2019.
Oh, I get it, Kyra. You think I'd know because I supposedly do this for a living, but I didn't.
Okay then. And so there was also a question, do you need to close out the program? You don't have to. You don't have to. However, if you decide to, you have to refer to your education English learner staff if you need to close it out. Also, these codes can be reported for all students with different statuses of EL
English language.
CSIS status, yeah. So it could be an EO, EL, IFF, or RFF.
Okay. Well, you know what, Kyron, I'm tired of your lip. Let's move on.
Okay, so let's now move on to the newest file for Fall 2. We have the post-secondary status file. So the post-secondary status file will be used to track students who completed high school in the prior academic year, who were CTE completers at any point during their 4-year stay at that school or at any school in California. So,
can you repeat that point again about when they completed the CTE program, Karen? I think we had a question earlier that asked if we were only reporting completers for this year, if they completed.
Okay. Yes, anyone who completed a CTE pathway during their 4-year enrollment at any California school, high school, will be reported. So meaning if a student completed their pathway in their sophomore year, their junior year, or of course the senior year, you can include them in that list to survey with regards to post-secondary status information. So the PSTS is a file used to replace the E2 survey. So in prior years, I guess, you use the E2 survey, you send out the survey and submit those and gather the information. Now, that is incorporated in CalPADS as the PSTS file. So as you can see, for Fall 2, you only gather information for CTE completers, meaning the student completed the pathway. any student who just finished the capstone but didn't complete the pathway should not be reported. And so how do you determine this list of students? You can run your 15.2 cohort from last year and then filter for just the completers, right? And then you can match that with the 3.15, which is the CT completers list, and you should be able to identify these students. So you can move back, let's say 18, 19 for those who completed in senior year, 17, 18 for those who completed in junior year, and 16, 17 if they completed during their sophomore year.
There's an easier method.
What?
Since this isn't new, right?
Mm-hmm.
The E2 Carl Perkins has been going on for years. There's probably a CTE program director in your district that is very familiar with this process.
That's right.
And they will know the collection of students, how to submit the survey, and when it needs to be reported in. In fact, most likely this data was already in your student information system.
That's right.
You just didn't have a need for it.
That's a good point, Nick.
I learned that at a conference.
Very good. So, what is contained in the PSTS file? First is the education program participation type, which identifies the type that qualifies the student for the survey. So they could be someone who was in the California Partnership Academy, so used code 10 and code 24 CTE completers. So these two subgroups will be collected in fall 2. For those, however, if you notice, there's another one. It's code 30, which is for the special ed. These students will be reported in end of year 4. So basically, anyone who's CPA and CTE last year, or who completed high school last year, should be surveyed and will be reported for fall 2. Anyone who were completers last year, who are special ed, should be reported in end of year 4. And then, of course, the last field is the post-secondary status, which identifies basically the result of the survey that they answered. So the PSTS can be submitted 2 ways. First is a batch file. This will be records for fall. This SIS. It could be SEID or PowerSchool or any of those SIS vendors. And then for end of year 4, that will come from your SEDS vendor, because these are special ed information. And then, of course, you can add the record manually online in CalPads. You could add, modify records.